Welcome to the Salem Chamber podcast. I'm Tom Hoffert, CEO of the Salem Chamber, and we're pleased to have you listening. Let's jump right in. Tim Davis.
Hello.
Valor Mentoring, The Rec. Tim, thanks for being with us today. Your website has a very compelling documentary, little subsection about your life and the new company venture at The Rec and everything that entails. But it also notes a pretty interesting start of your life. Now, you've been in Salem for the last 35 years, Salem Kaiser.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the start of life for you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was born in Illinois. Parents divorced when I was 2. We moved to Oregon. I had a caring, nurturing mom with a really bad picker. And so she remarried another 2 or 3 times. I moved 21 times during my school years from then till the end of high school. And so including moves to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Alaska and Colorado and many moves at each of those places. And so, so maybe I had less than an ideal upbringing from that perspective, pretty mobile and that type of thing. But, I was involved in athletics, and that was really a staple in my life. I think that I used that as a crutch to manage and get through, challenges or whatever. And so, yeah. And then moving forward, I've always been entrepreneurially minded. I mean, I started in first business when I was in high school, and then moving through, owned 2 or 3 other small businesses during my earlier adulthood. And then I divide my adult life in half, kind of half as a small business owner and then half in ministry stuff to do in town. But then got pulled back, that direction with the need in the community for what we saw as Valor Mentoring. So, yeah.
You come into an incredible space, the town and country space, longtime Salem Chamber members,
Yeah.
Kaiser members. Talk to me a little bit about how that came to fruition.
Yeah, so I serve on 6 nonprofit boards in Oregon, and I was leaving a meeting with Dick Whitnell, and he was getting in his car, and I was getting in mine, and he just had a very just flippant comment, said, Tim, Don and Ann really need to sell town and country lanes. And he got in his car, and I got in mine, and we drove away. But I couldn't let it go in my head. We had, at that point, Valor had an office at the basement of First Presbyterian Church and a full functioning audio studio, but we had outgrown that space and we were looking for different things. And as a board of a nonprofit, we thought we'd always blend in the marketplace at some point, maybe a coffee shop / whatever, And so I began to think, man, could we have our offices there? Could we do after-school programming there? Could we put a studio in there? Could we, and all those boxes kept getting checked, and I hadn't said anything to anybody. And so after about a month, I was at church, and somebody came up and said, hey, what's new with Valor Mentoring? And I said, well, the governor's got me, on a committee doing this and that. I said, but I got this really big idea to buy town and country and turn it into a public access community center. And they're like, well, how much do they want for it? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, don't you think you should ask? So, I've been in mortgage and real estate, so I knew about what the number was, and I know we didn't have it. So, but I went that next day. I went down to Town and Country, and Don came to the counter, and I asked him, and he came to the counter. He goes, "Don't you have something to do with Valor Mentoring?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I'm the founder and the president." He's like, "Oh," he goes, "I just got chills all over my body." He's like, "You want to buy the place?" And so, that's what I came to ask about. I said, "Yeah." And so, lots of conversations, and Don getting to a spot where he relinquished this baby of his, right? They owned it for 53 years. He worked there 6 years before that. And so my entire life, I'm 58 now, so 3.5 block radius, right? They just served the community, running a business and helping people. And, so, yeah. So fast forward, we knew that we didn't have that kind of money. And so I called Randy Compton at Pioneer Trust Bank and Dan McDowell and those guys. And I said, look, I got this idea. I want to buy town and country and turn it into this public access type facility. And they're like, Tim, I love you. I love what you're doing. Let's make it happen. I also left out the fact that we only had about $12,000 in the bank, and I was asking them for $1.4 million. So, but Randy's like, let's do it, And so I'm super proud of our partnership with Pioneer. They've pulled off many of these creative things that are good for the community that may not make immediate sense, mathematics and that type of stuff. And so, yeah, so that's how that happened. Yeah.
The localized banks really have an ability to see a bigger vision, and I applaud those who are able to take those risks and wrap their arms around our entrepreneurs for some bigger things. The Rec is an incredibly dynamic space. You have recording studio,
Yep.
cafe, coffee shop. You have, of course, the bowling amenities.
Sure.
But event space. Tell me, how is the public, when you walk in and maybe you haven't been there in quite some time, or maybe you've never been there. What's that experience like?
Yeah, we get a lot of whoa when you come in because it's lit different. It's not a dark bowling alley, right? And so we've got a live stage with accesses, $40,000 worth of sound equipment. Bands play live there. We have a preschool at one end. We got 2 conference rooms upstairs, and the restaurant, the studio, and other stuff. And so it's really just designed to be a community space, and part of what we do is driven by music, media, and the arts as a form of mentoring. And so that's part of why we put those things in there. But the community has embraced it. The civic community, the educational community, the faith community have all really come together to utilize the facility up to, I think, from 9 to 5, so from September to May or so, we're at 500 people a day coming through the building. So it's pretty cool.
Wow. Mentoring. So that's a topic very dear to most leaders. Talk to me about some mentors you may have had in your life that maybe brought you to this moment in time where you're now professionally bringing mentors together to create community good.
Yeah, I kid with people. I've got the best marriage I think I know on the face of the earth. I've got 2 of the finest young adult kids that are serving our community. I got an 805 credit score, and I still have 4 mentors in my life, And so I think we never arrive, And so when I got to young adulthood, I obviously realized that my manhood belt was about half empty of tools. And so I just began to ask for God to put people in my life. I want to be a husband someday. I want to be a father. I want to be those things. And I recognize I'm not currently equipped very well to do those. And so from coaches in high school and my college years to other community leaders and business folks. And, I'll name a few names, but I'll leave out a bunch of really cool people, but Buddy Puckett, Sven Anderson, Dick Whitnell, Jack McLennan, Bruce Stefanik, which is a senior pastor at Church on the Hill, and many more people have invested, in me. And then watching you guys as, Chamber and other leaders, Church on the Hill, as I was on the pastoral staff there for about 12, 13 years. But we were very much outside the church walls doing stuff. So I was connected in the community, but not in the way I am now. And so, and then about 8 years ago, me, Sven Anderson, and Buddy Puckett, who've been getting together for 20 years every week for the most part. And guys would come and need help in their marriage, their finances, their business, and whatever, and we'd spend time with them. And one morning we got blammed and felt like we were supposed to duplicate ourselves. And so we began to ask another guy to meet with another guy, and we didn't set out to do all that we're doing now, but I think now we're at about, 350 volunteers, 31 employees. This fall, we had our 3rd and 4th facility, so in just 6.5 years or so, it's been pretty bonkers.
You bring up a real interesting name there that I wasn't expecting to hear. Sven Anderson is the gentleman that brought me into what used to be called Capital Downtown Rotary.
Okay.
Myself, Jeremy Jensen, and Brandon Blair. Ironically, unfortunately, we lost Jeremy. A dear friend took his own life a couple of summers ago. But Brandon is now serving on the Salem Chamber board. Incredible gentleman of faith. And Sven was probably a big part of linking that together.
Sure.
And I think of where I am now. In full honesty, Sven was probably recruiting me to be a New York Yankee.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I was young. I was coming out of undergrad, and I ultimately went to work here at the Salem Chamber under Mike McLaren, and I thought,
what a great guy. Yeah.
Would this be now the end of Sven and I's relationship? Was it transactional, meaning he wanted me to be an agent, or would there be some more teeth to this? And Sven was incredible and has been kind of in and out of chamber involvement for a number of years, but he is one of those that I look back and I was pretty young, and I thought actually Sven was pretty young, and he probably was at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, boy, I could really start to network with some people here and see some special things. I'm glad you brought that name up. Yeah. I want to switch gears a little.
Yeah.
Success is measured in different ways by different people depending on your optics. For some, it's financial. For some, it's health, their family, ability to do things they've always dreamed. How do you define success?
Yeah, I think I first want to be known as a follower of Jesus. I want my wife to be able to easily and truthfully say that I'm a phenomenal husband. I want my kids to say I'm a phenomenal father. And if the rest of the community and the business and the other things I do think that what I'm doing brings value, then I appreciate that. But that isn't the highest priorities I have. And so with that, I think that being responsible with my money and that type of stuff, as far as debt and other things, I mean, we don't have car payments. We don't finance anything outside of our home, that type of thing. And so I try to be responsible from that way, but money is not the driver for me. Impacting others, and hopefully the legacy I leave is actually in that order, that people recognize me as a phenomenal husband and father, and that I served our community as best I could. And when I make mistakes, which I will, I'll let you down at some point, right? But I'll own it and I'll try to learn from it so that I don't make that same mistake twice. And that's really what I have to offer. So.
I like that. In fact, that's in our workplace here at the Salem Chamber. We're nonprofit work, very similar servant leadership to yourself, obviously serving a business community, but we're going to make failures.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of people who you don't go to college to learn how to work at a nonprofit.
Right.
You learn some different skill sets. And the ability for our staff teams and ourselves to have some grace in failure is probably actually part of the maturation process we all go through. And I think it's healthy because failure brings out a lot of things that maybe you didn't see about the process that you were going through. Would you be vulnerable enough to share with me a time or two where you had a failure? And what were the symptoms of that failure?
Yeah, I think as we all experienced different ways, COVID and that type of stuff. So we bought Town and Country Lanes February 7th of 2020, and the governor closed us on the 16th of March. So 6 weeks, and our board sitting upstairs in a dark room, and them kiddingly kind of, okay, Tim, what'd you get us into? No, but we knew that we didn't get the building to go bankrupt, and to honor the board we have, which all decisions we make are typically 100% unanimous, and we continue to work till we get to that, But we just kept doubling down, right? We gutted the restaurant and rebuilt that. And then we put in at the next second shutdown, we put on the roof. But I let a lot of those, what I considered to be invasive policies, frustrate me, And so I was maybe 6 months, 8 months into that, and I realized that far too much of my mental time was being spent on that stuff instead of really what I'm called to do in the organization, and that's to mentor and provide opportunities for that, And so God didn't make me a governor. He didn't make me a senator or a legislator, And so I leave that to wonderful people, Some I agree with policies and some I don't, right? And so it doesn't mean that I don't stay up to date, but I no longer 15 minutes a day is all I allow myself to have conversations when it comes to political and those social issues, because what I found is it kind of poisons me, and then I get this negative, vibe going in me, and that doesn't produce good stuff. And so I'm better just parking that and getting back to doing what I'm designed to do. And so, so during that time, I think I probably would have done a few things differently, from a policy perspective.
Well, that to me doesn't sound like failure. That sounds like navigating a course. And sometimes the seas are a little bumpier than we anticipate. You hit on a topic that a little further down my list, but you grabbed it and it pulls me there. As a leader, people are needing things from us, and that's an incredible gift to be put in these positions and asked to serve our community. But it does come with, there is a physical and a mental taxation sometimes. Knowing that a lot of business leaders are going to listen to this and take a listen to your perspective, talk to me a little bit about how Tim Davis recharges. How does Tim reload, lifetime learner? How are you continuing to keep the pot full?
Yeah. I think one is my mentoring relationships. First for me would be my quiet time with the Lord. But then I'm what I call a raging extrovert. So I do get charged from being in, any environment. The more people, the better, right? But people are like, man, you're the busiest guy I know. I hear that a lot, right? And I get that they see me in busy environments, but when I go home, I go home and I put on sweats, and that mentally helps me to just unplug. So I try to be present with my wife. I mean, we're empty nesters now, but I would have said be present with my kids, and then little things like that. I mean, I have a super peaceful home thanks to my wife, right? And so that's a refuge to me, and there's never really any stress not produced by our relationships. There's certain other things, of course, but yeah, so I recharge by reading quietly and then spending time with my wife, Yeah.
The role of, back to professional background, the role of mentorship. You've had mentors in your life, and you're compelled to bring together, you said 350 mentors working out in our community.
Yeah, well, in different volunteer portions, we do different events and stuff.
Okay.
So not all of those are actually weekly mentors, but yeah. So
if let's talk about the two channels.
Yep.
Because I would imagine there are at least two channels. You have those needing mentorship and those skilled to provide mentorship.
Yeah.
Let's tackle the second one first. If you would like to serve as a mentor and you align with the values of Valor, you feel you're a strong community caretaker and like to work with people, what attributes are you looking for in a mentor, and what would somebody need to do to approach you about that?
Yeah. So the best thing that you bring to the table as a mentor is your ears. I think sometimes people are like, oh, I've got to just have all these wonderful, brilliant things to say, right? But we first got to earn the right to be heard, right? And so that's one of the principles why we don't pay our mentors. They're all volunteer. I don't think that's a scalable model, as well as at some point a young person. So we mentor in public school, private school, juvenile system, foster care, all that stuff. And so at some point the kid goes, how much do you get paid to come every week or whatever? And when we're able to say nothing, it means more, I think, to the young person, right? And so, not that counseling and paying for those services aren't a wonderful thing, right? But I think that's key to what we do. So being a great listener and showing up, because it's part of our training that, like, if you're not going to make it, I mean, obviously things happen, right? But communicating with the person you're mentoring with. But if you end up doing that too often, you end up causing more damage than good, because they already have trust maybe issues and stuff. So we really require, typically the typical ask is 1 hour a week, for a year commitment, whether that's a school year or a year, so. Yeah.
And would they find information on that? Is it best to go to the website?
Yeah, if you went to valormentoring.com, on every page there would be an opportunity, a button to either be a mentee, or if you'd like to be a mentor, and that takes you through a process. And we've got really innovative people on our staff. We're doing some stuff in mentoring that I don't know that's being done anywhere else. Every person is going through gets an ACEs trauma assessment as well as a personality assessment. And so those things cost us money, but it's really important. So the mentee and the mentor both get a personality assessment. And then we'd use a particular one, DISC, but beyond that, it's a John Maxwell version. So let's say, Tom, you're mentoring me, and so you get a report about yourself. So you're learning something about yourself, and you're also learning something about me, but it also tells you how I receive information best from your personality type. So that's like we're 2 to 5 visits of mentoring, right? So it just helps us match better. It's not a perfect process, but it's improving our matching ability by using that.
That's incredibly savvy. I went through, in my former corporate role, I went through the personality, I believe it's called, and a pretty dynamic program. I found it insightful to look at my employees, of course, but I got to tell you, I was more wanting to understand myself and how I communicate with people. And I quickly learned I'm a sprinter. I like to move quick. You're a guy who likes to move quick. And it's interesting how we interact with people who have different, especially those who may you're a profound extrovert, and when you communicate with an introvert, it's a very different tactic system. So kudos to you guys for doing that. Let's switch gears to the other piece then, the mentee portion. Yeah. So how are those identified? Is that a communal identification, or do people actually reach out to you and say, Tim, I could really use some help in this space?
Yeah, so there is an endless line of mentees. as many mentors as we can bring on, we have a mentee to attach. So if you're a listener, and people try to start discounting themselves, I think because maybe you're perfect. I know I'm not. And so like I could discount myself because in this area, maybe my engine isn't running on all 6 cylinders, but that doesn't mean that I don't bring value to even a young person about like just showing work ethic. Or, there's some of those simple things that we can do. So we don't have to have every aspect of our life put together to call ourselves a mentor, right? And so, so that'd be one thing I would say is that, but they are typically referred by a teacher, a counselor, a parole officer, a parent, right? A foster system, that type of stuff. But we do require that the young person fill out the mentee application. Now they can sit with a parent or a guardian or whatever, but we want them to be a part of that process because, as a parent, you think you know what's best for your child, and often you do, but it's still got to be their choice, right? So my son really needs a mentor, okay, then have your son fill out the app, right? Like he's got to, at least he or she needs to buy in, right? A little bit. So, yeah.
I'm far from a perfect person. I have yet to meet one. And I'm pretty confident I won't. When you look at these individuals who are coming forward, and maybe they're being volunteered, maybe they're being voluntold, parents signing off for the young people, is there an opportunity if somebody was wanting specific to a business track or something that may be, a young or not even necessarily young, but an aspiring entrepreneur? Do you have connections in that space?
Yeah. And so that's a part of when they're filling out the application, it asks for some interests and stuff. And then it asks them, what do they think about mentoring and those type of things. But they could be interest in hunting and fishing or music or media or arts or business, and so we use that information to match them with as best we can, somebody who's going to fulfill those needs. And sometimes as a mentee, you don't always know everything you really need. Right. And so, but we have, I started, there's a entrepreneur development group that I lead. And so, there's opportunities there for young people and for business owners to engage with people, so. Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Individuals in this community, maybe I'll ask you to give me 3. Give me 3 individuals in this community who inspire you and why they inspire you.
Yeah. For sure, Dick Whitnell, because I don't know anybody in Oregon who's done more than that guy. His passion, he's a bold guy, but his sense of urgency. Now I know that it's easier to find urgency as we get older, but I'm trying to apply that now. I want to have that same sense of urgency because I don't actually know whether I'll be here next week, right? But I'm building a plan, right? I intend to have a million mentoring hours. We intend to be in all 50 states in the next 15 years, right? So, and we have connections in all 50 states and all that, on a big board that we're going to work through, But yeah, so, Dick Whitnell, I would say that Sven Anderson is also one of my closest friends, but I trust him with everything in my life. My money, my family, Yeah. So, limited it to 3. I would say, from a business perspective, probably Buddy Puckett. So yeah. And there's others that inspire me, Rich Duncans and Gladys Blums and those which I have relationship with. But I'm close. I have more interaction with the folks I just mentioned to you, maybe than those. So.
Sure. You must have seen my cheat sheet here. I love to talk. This is a term that my staff hear quite often, but it's trajectory. What trajectory are we on? And how do we, for me, trajectory is about an upward path, right. not a downward path. And how do we rise to achieve where we want to be, not where we are? Talk to me about trajectory when you look at your business model at the Rec and your business model at Valor Mentoring.
The expansion I'm talking about, all 50 states, doesn't include buildings in every one of those states, using our tools and our mentoring and our relationships to make that happen. But I think that I'm not a hyper detailed goal guy, but I have just bigger chunks is the way my brain works, And so that's what I'm driven by. But I think trajectory, this is stuff that you and I and maybe many of our listeners understand, but I mean, you are the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? I'm either at the low of those or high of those 5 in spiritual maturity, physical, financial, emotional health, all those things. So choose your 5 well, right? And so, but God made me a risk taker, and he made me a guy who moves quickly, and sometimes I'm a Peter out of the Bible, and I probably should have not done that quite so quick, but I'd rather do that than do nothing. So, there's times when I get calls that I can solve a problem before the end of the day, so yeah. But when it comes to trajectory, if you're not improving, you're sliding backwards. So that's something that just philosophically in my head, I think that's the case. And so I have pretty high standards. We have high grace in our organization, but we don't compromise the standard. And so you want to know what our values are? If you go inside the bowling alley, the rec, they're 22 feet wide and 9 feet tall, written on the wall. So yeah.
I love that. The visual imagery is something I really believe in as well. And we have a saying, it's about integrity. The truth is not the best policy. It's the only policy. And
right.
When you deal in a world of truths and sincerity and integrity, you do not have to escape what you may have falsely created or others may be falsely created for you. Let's talk tactical. How do you interact with your staff? And knowing that a lot of CEOs and management are kind of the audience that will be listening to this sort of podcast, Tim, how do you tactically talk with your staff? Is there a cadence? Do you have weekly meetings? Tell us a little bit of the inside. Show us behind Oz's wall.
Yeah. So we have one for sure, a staff meeting that's I'd call it management or leaders, portion. And that's a 1 hour meeting, sticking with the Dick with Nell, 59 minutes. Right. And so it's a pretty fast paced opportunity for everybody to check in and let everybody else know what's happening in what we call their pillar, whether it was mentoring or the rec or music, media, and the arts and the other things we're doing. So that's certainly a staple to what happens. And then I do check-ins with people, not as hyper religiously, but regularly. Jesus would call it running your hand over the sheep, right? And so it's important to me to be able to check in. And there's times when I'm a little thin on that. I've been too busy and running, and I haven't slowed down enough to listen, at times. So maybe that's a place that I can continue to grow in. But I'm also, I have insecurities, but I'm not insecure when it comes to trying to attract and hire the best people on the planet. Pretty much everybody on our board is far smarter than I am. Like maybe half our employees are more intellectually gifted than I am. I'm not offended by that because it helps us to accomplish more. So yeah, I mean, even the new acquisition of the Grange and what we're doing there is a part of our staff having something largely to do with it. So
I wanted to touch base on that. Tell me about the excitement of the Grange purchase.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Kaiser Grange, it's a 5,000 square foot facility. It's about 79, 80 years old or so. And it came up for sale, and somebody took a picture of the listing, real estate listing, and texted me, and they said, Valor buys next legendary building, makes youth center. I'm like, that's not a half bad idea. So let's make some phone calls. And then that next day I took our key staff. I got a hold of Gabe Johansson and said, hey, can you get me in the place? And so I walked them through and said, if this was going to be ours, what would you guys want to do with it? Right. And so that began, so it's not just my dreams, right? It's everybody else's. And so we began to pop some pretty cool ideas of what could happen, and so following through on that process now, it's ours, and we're currently gutting and renovating it, So yeah, we expect it's 200 yards from the front door of McNary High School. Expect to serve 200 to 500 kids a week out of that facility. Yeah.
Your business model is incredibly dynamic. It has a lot of pieces to it. You are clearly juggling a lot of things, but juggling them very, very well. What would your staff team tell us if Tim wasn't in the room? What would your staff team, what story would they tell us about your leadership?
Yeah, they definitely would understand that I'm a visionary. I'm certainly a fast mover. And just because I've said something in the discussion doesn't always mean we're actually doing that, right? I'm also a verbal processor. So I have to be careful of that a little bit, because when I'm just talking it through, that doesn't mean you have to run out and execute that, So we've learned as a staff, that. I think they'd say I'm a hard worker. I think that I try to love each of them, and that I'm a little bit of a go-getter, and that sometimes I'm out in front too far for them, and I have to continue to pace myself, so that because at times I might stretch people a little thin, with my enthusiasm and yeah. So
it's hard to gauge as leaders. We don't always know what our staff, I call it our invisible backpack. We all carry an invisible backpack. In that backpack are pebbles. And some days you have more pebbles in the invisible backpack than others, but you don't know the weight that our teams are carrying with them from home, different goals, relationship issues, financial issues. And so I try and be watchful of those backpacks, as I'm sure you do. I think our employees have really become so much about our branding and who we are culturally. I would suggest our Salem Chamber is defined as much by our board of directors and the vision of that board as the staff team executing. And I think our employees are such a reflection of who we are as organizations, and yours are very present in the chamber, and they bring your energy, and so you ought to feel very good about what you're doing with at least your recruitment employees who are out and at our events. So we appreciate their participation very much.
No, we appreciate the chamber. I tell people often that, and maybe it's a little easier for our type of business, but it's the easiest marketing dollar that if we're going to call it a marketing dollar, it's the easiest marketing dollar we spend, because for us, most people can come use a bowling alley at some point during their year, right? And so, and compared to maybe insurance, it's a little maybe harder to recruit and get in business. But yeah, I mean, it's an easy thing for us to do for sure. Yeah.
Thank you to our employees. I want to close with what gets Tim Davis excited about tomorrow. As you look out, we know the Grange project.
Yeah.
As you look at an expansion into 50 states, what's got your juice going? What's got you excited about the next 2 weeks, the next 2 months?
Yeah, we're gonna also open in Woodburn this fall. And so it's not our own facility. We're partnering with the church there to start after-school programming. Kind of gives us a beta version, right, of what's happening. But that's in partnership with the school district and the mayor and others. So, and then expansion-wise, it's the stories. Like mentoring is always as easy to get data from compared to maybe medical data and stuff. So some of it just comes from transformation, and so I'm fortunate to be able to hear crazy cool stories, that are happening with people investment. From one of our current managers reached out many years ago from jail, and I need a mentor, and all the way through, worked all the way through and graduated college, and now, managing a part of our business, and so that's a cool 100%, 360 turnaround, right? People have came to us like their plan was to wait another year and a half till their dad gets out of prison and kill him for the abuse that he gave to his sisters. And that guy's now running a Bible study. He's mentoring others, and and there's a relationship with his father now that wasn't. So those type of things really jack me up, But I'm a growth guy too. So I mean, when it comes to looking out, I've got some meetings next month that'll continue to see what kind of acceleration we might add to that. And so we wanted to just mentor 100, 150 people, I mean, we're easily there, and I could back the throttle back, but it's just not the way I'm built. I feel like I have at least 10 more years of full pedal down until I need to, back it off a little bit. But, and hopefully we'll be in all 50 states by then, and we'll be doing lots of cool stuff, and we'll be at more than 1 million mentoring hours a year, probably by 2030. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's the plan. We'll see if I live to see it. But hopefully I build a process, with talented people that'll carry it on and do better than I will.
Well, that is part of the leadership lens that is challenging sometimes, is our succession planning. And we're starting to do it here, and most savvy businesses are. You're incredibly, your perspective and especially on yourself is incredibly deep and accurate. How would somebody, given that you're a mentor, if somebody is not quite as self-aware as maybe they should be, either in business or private life, what are some of those first steps to self-assessment?
Yeah. I mean, I would say a couple of different personality assessments, right? There's Strength Finders 2.0, and that's a Barna thing, which is really good. And then that DISC assessment, that's the Maxwell, version. I think it really helps because the better you know yourself, the more effective you're going to be, right? And so, yeah. And I recognize, as you and other leaders are listening, like, I don't have all the gifts, right? So, I mean, in my marriage, what works is I'm the spontaneous guy, the vision and the fun guy, and my wife is the detail, and she pays almost all of our bills and makes sure that we finish projects around the house, right? So that I don't just start them, right? but and that's the same on our board and in our staff, right? They're diverse, not just maybe racial or socioeconomically, but we have risk-averse folks in our board and risk takers, and I think that's really important so that we can grow at the right pace, which is pretty quick, but responsibly. So, yeah.
I want to close with this and get your final thoughts on a challenge I've been sharing within our business community is and I think it started possibly with the loss of Brian Johnston and Mike McLaren, but Jerry Frank, certainly Selma Pierce, and Dick Withnell, who you reference, is so open about his belief and how much we need to be caretakers of this community. Tim, wrap us up by talking to us about the importance of community caretakers and why you are so involved in this community and committed to Salem Kaiser communities.
Yeah, I mean, I get lots of accolades and articles and, Kaiser First Citizen or whatever those things are, right? But that it's not why I'm doing it, right? And so those are important. It also makes you want to do more. But I think that I always try to leave things better than we find them, and personally and as an organization. And then I would say that as leaders, the two things our culture is desperate for and doesn't have enough of is gratitude and purpose. And so, I mean, I could tie those back to a biblical principle, but you'll also notice that there's no crosses on the walls in our facilities, and I'm not using hyper-Christianese. I don't need to. I'm just going to model what I think the Bible teaches me to do, and that's probably enough. and maybe you ask, but yeah. And so, but as leaders and employers, if you can get someone in a position of gratitude and they have purpose, then hurdles are much easier to get over. The stumbles and the walls that our days and weeks present us, we'll just plow through, right? But if we don't have purpose, then like I think we're finding right now, and from mental health to whatever, I think our culture is really desperate for purpose. And I think as employers, that's our responsibility to provide at least some of that, at least in the employment portion. But hopefully we actually invest in hearing a little bit more about their personal life. Is there ways that we can help this other thing happen? Like I've helped 2 employees leave our organization because of bigger dreams they have. And I think that's also a good thing.
Oh, that's a discipline that is challenged. I've had that here occur, and I look at the immensely talented staff team that we have here, and I never sleep knowing I'm going to think I'm going to have them forever, but enjoy their talents while they're here, and as leaders really maximize our impact. Tim Davis nailed it. If you are interested in getting a hold of Tim and his organization and you see yourself as a potential mentor, Tim, tell us the website.
Yeah, valormentoring.com.
Excellent. It's been great having you on, Tim. Thank you for sharing your perspective, and we appreciate what you are doing in this community because it matters.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Tim Davis, President, CEO, The Rec and Valor Mentoring. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Salem Chamber podcast. The Salem Chamber is a 501c6 not-for-profit organization representing nearly 1,100 businesses in the greater Salem area. For additional information, please visit salemchamber.org. This has been a production of Dan Johnson and Lena Prine on the Salem Chamber's professional staff team.